Did you know that Parkinson's disease is the third leading cause of dementias? It's just as devastating as Alzheimer's disease, but yet fewer people know about it, likely because it's not as prevalent as Alzheimer's disease. Well, we're going to change that today. We're going to talk to a guest who's lost his mother and his best friend to Parkinson's disease. And I know you're going to want to share this with your best friend so that we can all bind together to find cures for these horrific diseases. Welcome to Fading Memories, the podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. I'm your host, Jennifer Fink. My mom had Alzheimer's for 20 years, and when I went looking for answers, I had to start a podcast to find them. Join me as we navigate the challenges of dementia caregiving together. Let's share our experiences, find solace, and discover the strength within us. Get ready to embark on a transformative caregiving journey with Fading Memories. Life throws us curveballs. Grief, illness, pet loss, feeling overwhelmed. You don't have to face these challenges alone. Introducing Help Text, expert support delivered conveniently straight to your phone. Weekly messages tailored to your specific needs, providing guidance and strength during difficult times. Whether you're caring for a loved one, grieving a loss, or simply just feeling lost, Help Text offers a supportive community and expert advice. Take back control of your well-being. Don't wait. Visit helptext.com/Fading Memories Podcast, or simply use the hot link in the show notes and sign up today for a 10% discount off your annual membership. That's helptext.com/Fading Memories Podcast for weekly messages that will improve your well-being and mental health with every notification. Invest in your well-being today. Hello. Thank you again for joining us, listeners. I have a great topic for you today. With me is Dr. George Ackerman. He is a Parkinson's disease advocate. We're going to talk a lot about Parkinson's disease, but he does some other things as well. So without further ado, let's welcome George and have him talk about his journey into becoming a Parkinson's disease advocate. So thanks, George, for joining us.
Thanks to you and to your audience, because it means the world to me and my family to have an opportunity to speak today. And I was really excited, looking forward to it. And one of my favorite things is your background and the flowers. It makes me, even during tough times and these talks, it still makes me give a little bit of a smile. But unfortunately, my mother passed on 1/1/2020 due to Parkinson's. And when she had it for about 15 years, but the last 4 is when she really needed me. And I always say she sacrificed a lot of her life when I was a child. She was a school teacher and a master's degree and kind of gave it all up to raise me and my brother. And I knew when she needed me, I needed to be there, and I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for her sacrifices.
I think most of us feel that way about our moms, or probably should. So I looked it up because I wanted to make sure that I was correct. Parkinson's disease is the third leading cause of dementia, which, as I mentioned before we were recording, I don't think most people are aware of that. Is that something that you've also discovered in your talks and your advocacy?
No, they don't talk much about it. The sad thing is that because there's no cure, is because there's so many different variations of Parkinson's to each individual. So what occurred to my mother in our journey doesn't mean, it'll happen to someone else. She had late onset dementia, which brought the delusions and hallucinations, which were really terrifying. Not every person, though, with Parkinson's will get that. And as far as I'm aware, Parkinson's, unfortunately, is the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world. So it's not even just the U.S., it doesn't discriminate. It reaches around everywhere. I mean, 2 years ago, I decided it's not just about my mother and me anymore. It was about everybody. And I feel like you, we're a family in this fight for all diseases, not just Parkinson's. It just happened that dementia and Parkinson's touched our family. But I was shocked to find out there's about 10 million people around the world that have Parkinson's and diagnosed. So I decided to interview 600 people from Africa to India to England, France, Spain, Iceland, and shocking, even Nova Scotia. So it just shows that it really, again, and sadly, it affects everybody. This possibly not exactly the same, but a lot of the same types of symptoms.
So thank God for Zoom, huh?
I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing. And I'm actually writing a follow-up book about social media and how it wasn't always easy because there's some crazy people out there. So you know, never let. My lesson was, and my lesson here, if anyone wants to know, is never let a person, even if it's a stranger or someone you know, ever thwart or prevent you from doing what you feel in your heart is right. And you know, I've had some interesting scenarios in like Facebook groups and things where, you know, you're supposed to have First Amendment in the U.S., but not on Facebook. So, you know, that'll be in the future. But, you know, like I said, it's not easy to reach everyone. Some days I'm still kind of, whether it was caregiving and now as an advocate, detrimental to my own health because I just feel like even meeting today, if we reach one person, we'll change the world. Well, there's a certain point where I want to reach everyone, and you know, it's not normally like not physically or mentally possible. And you know, I need to kind of cut back, but then every time I see someone struggling, it makes me kind of forget my own, you know, stress or feeling like I'm tired and to keep fighting till we find a cure.
So only about 10 million people worldwide have Parkinson's. That's pales in comparison to Alzheimer's, which is
And
interesting.
that's a big thing is there is more attention, unfortunately, to Alzheimer's because more people are affected. But that doesn't mean we should, you know, forget or leave out those who are also suffering from Parkinson's. And I did a live event a few weeks ago for the Michael J. Fox Foundation, an IQ event, the community event. And you know, like we said, virtual is amazing because I get to be with incredible people like you and your audience. But being there physically, like right in front of people who unfortunately are suffering and the families is just not just inspiring but life changing because there are people who like actually came by our table and I mean some were in you know wheelchairs. One had a wheelchair I've never seen, which was like a standing wheelchair. It was interesting, but sadly she kind of one of the symptoms of Parkinson's is you're it's almost like you just freeze, like you just can't move. It's a movement disorder. And she was in front of my table and kind of frozen. So I went over and hugged her and just wanted her to know she has our support, but not something that is, you know, people have to leave their careers. Many are scared to tell their own family, their jobs, and it's unfortunately, you know, crippling disease and slow progression for some, but fast, like in my case, for my mother.
Does Parkinson's hit people younger on average than Alzheimer's? I know it seems like younger onset Alzheimer's, which is basically what my mom had, but she wasn't diagnosed early enough in the disease to be classified that way. Does it? Because I know, like, I'm a child of the 80s. Michael J. Fox was my guy from, you know,
Yeah.
Family Ties to Back to the Future and all the movies. And if you haven't, I think you have seen it, but for the listeners, if you have not had the opportunity to watch Apple's special called, you are going to remember the name of the movie. I'm so terrible with names. It's the Michael J. Fox movie that Apple did on Apple TV.
I had the honor to meet him a month or two ago, and it was just an incredible experience. But it was almost like the life flash of before me because I was so excited, but at the same time I was so sad because I saw what the disease was doing to him.
Yeah,
So
the
that
name of
was really,
sorry,
yeah,
the name of the movie was Still. I was
yeah,
thinking
still
Still Me, but
active.
it's just Still.
I just found it. I was looking at it, but I saw it. I loved it, and I usually don't look at comments, but I did notice people were literally saying now they're aware, and that's really why he's a hero of mine because he could have chosen, like many, which is nothing wrong with it, who want to be private to kind of just not fade away, but do their own thing. Instead, he has raised over 2 billion, not million, $2 billion for research, and the thing that stinks, in my view, to speak for plain English is he still, not doing too well, even though they've raised 2 billion. A few weeks ago, he had to be brought out on a wheelchair when he won a big award. So, and he stood up, which was amazing. So he's a fighter. He inspires me to keep fighting. And I was really honored when I gave him we have a band we give out for free, just as in memory of my mother and for Parkinson's. And he actually put it on, was wearing it, and he now knows about my mother. He knows about our journey, and we told them, we raised over $10,000 over the last few years for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. We're still donating. And, he knows that we're out there also fighting. And we're really again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but a family in this fight. Because if we don't, that's why I want to come on your show, to bring light to Parkinson's. Because if we don't have everyone aboard this ship, we're going to be further from a cure. So it's very important to reach people, not just inside the Parkinson's community, but also outside.
We definitely need more awareness so that people know how to interact with caregivers like us, family members like your mom, my mom, etc. But I derailed my question, which I'm really good at doing. Michael J. Fox got Parkinson's
Oh,
really
yeah.
young. Does Parkinson's generally hit people in like in their 40s, or is
Yeah,
that just?
there's a real misconception that it's like the elderly man disease, which is not true. Now we're actually trying to do more research and shed more light on females with Parkinson's, because there's not enough out there for that. But there is something called early onset, and he had it in his 30s. And I actually heard a story, which you could check if it's true, but that a baby was born with it in another country. So yes, they do have science that shows anyone can get it at any age. I don't know if I'll get it. They don't think it's genetics. They do think it's environment, and I completely agree. My mother had a nice home for 20 years in South Florida, but it had mold, it had termites, and we took care of it. But who knows what the heck they were spraying? And I interviewed an expert in the area of motor movement disorders and Parkinson's, and he even told me, which I was shocked, that the sprays, the chemicals on the dry cleaning could cause it. And I actually was speaking to him, and I wanted to take my suit off while we were talking and throw it out. And also the fruits that we buy and pesticides. So there's a lot of unfortunate things out there that can cause, we believe, Parkinson's, but there's no 100% science.
Well, that's kind of why I like talking to people that aren't always Alzheimer's caregivers,
Yeah.
because I firmly believe, one, I say this a lot on the show, not really sure modern life is good for our brains. And you just listed a few modern things like dry cleaning. Yay for me for being cheap and not ever buying clothes that need dry cleaning.
I stopped going, but then I started doing all these shows, and now I have to. So I'm spending a ton of it on this.
We need green screen clothes.
Right. Yeah, maybe we can come up with it.
But then, there's got to be a connection that they're missing, and maybe it's because you've got the group studying Parkinson's, you got this group doing Alzheimer's, and people doing vascular, and they all need to get in the same room and put their big science brains together. And I sometimes think they need to take a big step back and go, are we on the right track?
Yeah.
Because we finally, in the Alzheimer's community, we quote unquote have treatments. It's remains to be seen how good they are, but they're better than nothing at this point. And one thing leads to another. So hopefully the Parkinson's community can get caught up. Is there
One good thing is last December, I think we spoke around then, but they finally passed to the United States House of Representatives, the first ever national plan to end Parkinson's disease. And it's literally mirrored from the Alzheimer's bill, but we've never, shockingly and sadly, we've never had anything ever in history of the United States, which is really kind of sickening if I say it out loud, but that we've never had anything. So this will actually bring more, this will be the first time this federal funding, if it passes, for Parkinson's research, for caregivers, for those diagnosed. I wish they would add a section for people like me if we have time, but there's people who, I'm not diagnosed, I'm not a caregiver of someone alive, but I'm still, grieving even 4 years later. And there's a lot of lack of support still, in my experience, for people who lost a loved one due to Parkinson's. And we have like probably 20, 30 million people, unfortunately. And a lot of time, I think, and I'm just saying from my experience, that most people, they lose their loved one, even with Alzheimer's, they might just move on and go back to life, because they don't realize that they still have a say. Their loved one still matters, and their voice still counts. So that's a new shift I'm actually looking into. And we added a section on TogetherForSharon.com called In Memory, where I share interviews and journeys of people who are family members who lost someone from Parkinson's. Now, when I did the ones with advocates, I had 600, and there were thousands of people, but now it's much more complicated and difficult, but I've been able to find 10 or 11. I'm hoping to do that the rest of my life, but I want people out there who did lose a loved one due to Parkinson's or related to know that they're never going to be forgotten, and I'll keep fighting too to find a cure for those diagnosed and their families today, but in memory of all those, unfortunately, who didn't have a chance and lost their battle.
I understand that because so you lost your mom January 1st, 2020. My mom passed away March 31st, 2020.
Sorry to hear that.
And, you know, our family was blessed with nobody lost a job, nobody lost a home. You know, yeah, life was different, a little frustrating, little bit limiting, but I'd worked from home since 2005, so my life didn't change that much. So and I felt so blessed that I didn't have to try, you know, window visits or Zoom calls with my mom or, you know, all of the things that people did to keep connected to their loved ones during that insane time. But I don't think, you know, I think it actually drug out the whole grieving process. I feel like it's always there in the background. It's kind of weird. I I harass my friends at the Alzheimer's Association because 2 years after my mom died, they implemented bereavement support groups, which you can do for 2 years. I'm like, oh, thanks. So you automatically kicked me out of the group before you even started. And I think that's really good. But I'm also a support group facilitator. And there's been talk about, well, do we want to like insist that somebody move into the bereavement support groups so that the active support groups can maintain what they're doing, but they're known in this group? It's like a whole thing. It's like, oh my goodness, it's just so much support needed. And one of my big talking points is until corporate America realizes that these diseases, especially Alzheimer's, but when you add them all together, you know, I just learned there's like 80 million Americans that are part of the sandwich generation. So I was just barely past that when my dad died, and we had to start taking care of my mom. My sister was still sandwiched, but it's like, that's a lot of adults.
Yeah.
And it's affecting our economy. It's affecting the bottom line of corporations. And so it's my goal now to help train HR people to how to support people like us so that we can continue working and taking care of families and all of the things that we have to do until we can find a cure. So I'm assuming you still worked while you were caring for your mom because you're not that old.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still work even day and night now, but I have 3 children. Thankfully, my wife was my biggest support. Without her, even today, I would not make it probably because I could probably read a sentence later if we have time from the book that just we published. But and it's great that I have it because we never have the time that I like to, but it takes inside the good, the bad, and the ugly of a caregiver. And again, it's not, I don't think you could take a course. I was just thrown in like with the wolves, almost like when you're first going into policing in the street from the academy, or when you're becoming a lawyer into court from the law school. You don't really learn what you need to until you're out there. And that was something that, you know, it's not easy even to talk about a lot. I mean, I went through, you know, sadness, depression, anger, not at my mother, but at the disease. I mean, my mother was the sweetest, nicest human being I've ever met. She even took a light once and threw it in the wall because she was mad at Parkinson's and the doctors. We went to 15, just, you know, there's no cure. So it was very, very common. We went to experts too, and not much you could do. You could try and control the tremors, which was one of the big signs of Parkinson's. Some people, she had internal, but Michael J. Fox has external tremors. Also dystonia with the curling of the toes, and she had rigidity and very bad stiffness, so she couldn't even use one arm for towards the end. But so those were just some of the symptoms. Plus, all the medicine destroyed her stomach, so that was another world of issues. And as a male caregiver, it was complicated because I can't, you know, go into the bathroom with my mother. I didn't want to. I wanted her to have privacy and still feel like a human being. So we had to hire staff almost, and we paid like $12,000 a month just for full-time 24/7 care. She's made me swear, which I'm glad to say, that we never put her in a home. But there were days where even though I swore to her, I was going to tell my wife I'm going to go look at homes because not because I didn't want to help, but I couldn't. I'm not trained for any of this. And not only the Parkinson's, like we mentioned, then the dementia started, and it was just I felt like a nail, and like every day the hammer just kept hitting me and hitting me, and it was not easy. And then we shift now to advocacy, and same type of thing. Obviously, it's even worse because I miss my mother 24/7. But even the cover of the book, if you see it behind me, it's my favorite picture of my mother and I. It was the dance, the son and mother and son dance at my wedding, and that was like my favorite day of my life, except when my children were born. But in that moment, those 3 minutes, like Parkinson didn't matter, it didn't exist, and it'll never take that, memory. So even looking at the cover sometimes for me is not easy. And I mean, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds, law enforcement, and I'm big and tough, but I'm a mama's boy. And one day I was done with a meeting, went in the other room, and I fell apart. And my wife was thankfully there to sweep me back up. But it's, this stuff is not easy, but I think it has to be discussed because we're only going to end these all diseases if people like us and your audience share it. And please support your show and share it, share it, share it, because none of us are here for money. We're here to help people. And every time I see, every time I want to give up, because we were mentioning I'm having a third back surgery, unfortunately, every day I wake up and I'm in pain, I try to think about my pain, but then literally in a second, I think of all those still struggling, which is much worse to me with Parkinson's who have to lose their jobs, their family, everything. And I get right back up and I keep fighting. So.
Well, thank you for that. That's definitely not easy. You said something a few minutes ago that struck me. The one thing that I find really challenging with caregiving, it seems like all of us have to start at square one and recreate the wheel for ourselves and our loved one. And you said, because you're a lawyer and you're in law enforcement, when you leave the police academy, you get kind of tossed on the street to learn, but at least you have a training officer there to help you, to give you the look when you're going the wrong direction. You're not recreating the wheel of being a rookie cop. And I would assume the same thing in a courtroom. Thankfully, I don't have too much experience with either of those professions.
I always joke and say I can arrest you, I can defend you, and then I can teach you.
So I think that's one of the reasons I keep doing this show. I keep learning like things I truly wish I'd known like 10 years ago when, my dad had health issues that he didn't handle very well. And then dealing with his health issues on top of my mom's Alzheimer's. And he had the patience of a gnat, which didn't help anybody. It would have been nice if there was something that the doctors or a medical social worker or somebody could have said, okay, Jennifer's dad, this is okay. Well, now we know for sure your wife has Alzheimer's. So here's some things you need to start doing. Here's the direction to go. But no, it's just like they shrug their shoulders and be like, okay, best of luck, which just makes me nuts.
That's why I started TogetherForSharon.com. I was really felt alone. My mother felt alone. We were lost. So I wanted to build something completely free, not for me. It's been a huge investment, but it pays off for me just grieving because that helps me too. But we put like everything on the website from the 600 interviews that I've done around the world to my journey, my mother's. You can get the book if you're interested there. We also now have a newsletter. We started a section in memory for people who have lost a loved one. We have a section, it's called PWP, People with Parkinson's, who I put websites of people to try to help them raise money to pay their own medicine. Because I love the big organization, but a lot of time the little guy and the girl don't really, get something from the big organ. No offense, that's just reality. So I wanted them, like an artist who has Parkinson's, a guy who I've become family with who makes mugs and T-shirts for Parkinson's. So anything that goes to them, it goes to them. It doesn't touch me at all. We don't want anything. We don't accept money. Also, we have a section now, which I'm really proud of. I've been adding anyone who is an author with Parkinson's or on the Parkinson topic. There's a whole listing of books and how you can purchase. It's amazing. So everything's just growing and growing. It's kind of out of my control now. It's just getting bigger. I always said if 3 or 4 people see the site, I'll be happy, but there's a little counter that's hidden in the front, which you could see. And we've had almost 40,000 people visit the site. So I don't know if that's because of my work or unfortunately, is it because Parkinson's is growing? And I hope it's not because of that. So I have one little passage from the book if you want. I can.
Yeah, definitely.
kind of fits in. I've never done this before. I didn't have the book last time, but this is, about caregiving, but it starts off the ultimate challenge. My life was difficult to manage between my mother, family, and work. Initially, before caregiving, I felt like I was juggling a few small tasks, but when I assumed the primary caregiver role, I held an entire universe on my shoulders. So that's just a quick thing because I don't want to take too much time, but that's really how I felt. I felt like, that famous Zeuser where he's a guy and he's holding the world. And it just, I felt like every day it was just something else. And like I said, I would do it all again. I have no regrets except that we don't have a cure. But, I was brought up to be very reliable and strategic. So I wrote like a list of things to do. We literally tried everything and just nothing, unfortunately, worked. So, that's my only sadness out of it all.
Well, hopefully they'll get caught up to the Alzheimer's group. I mean, they discovered Alzheimer's disease like 100 years ago. So hopefully you
Yeah.
guys are a little faster on the treatments. And they don't know what causes it. They don't have a treatment. This sounds real familiar. Um,
The only thing they do have breakthrough was actually last year, and it's called a biomarker. And now I wouldn't do it because I'm already getting needles, but they put a giant needle in your spine, and I believe they're able to determine if you have it, which is very important because now you can treat it. Otherwise, if people are getting misdiagnosed, late diagnosed, wrong diagnosed, that doesn't help. It's horrible. So that's huge. But what they really want to do in the next few years is take that giant spine pill, needle, and turn it into a simple little regular blood test like you and have it at every doctor's office. Obviously, it's still not a cure, but guess what? Now we've learned that 45 minutes of exercise a day for everybody, even if it's not a sum apart, could really slow the progression. Dancing, boxing, rock steady boxing, ballet. I mean, it's just incredible. There is a lot out there. So again, Together for Sharon, we list all the different resources from around the world. And my goal is that people know, even doing the show today, that they're never alone in this fight. And there's people out there who do send our love and support, and we want nothing in return. We even have a section for donations. And if you look closely, all it is 5 big organizations like Michael J. Fox Foundation and Drive Toward a Cure. They're actually, those organizations were nice enough to make a link, and it's in memory of my mother. But all donations go to those organizations. We do not accept a dime or a penny even. So I just want, again, my biggest thing is that I don't want any money. Anyone who sees this, just again, know that you're never alone.
well, that's one of the reasons I chose podcasting as a method of sharing stories and advice and all this good stuff, because you can listen to it whenever you need. I've got over 300 episodes. You have to kind of dig around for some of them because my hosting platform only shows 300 at a time. Although right now it seems like it's 295, which is plenty. That's almost a whole year's worth of listening. If you listen to one a day, you're good, but they're there. But you were talking about rock steady. So I had a neighbor before I moved up to the Sierra foothills of California. One of my neighbors had Parkinson's, and I still worry a little bit about them because he was probably 6'5", and his wife was like maybe 5 foot, maybe if she was wearing heels. She was a tiny lady. And he always said, he didn't want to be a burden on her. And it was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like my mother. But he gave up being a Rotarian, which was a very, very important part of his life, because in our town, the only time he could do the rock steady boxing for the Parkinsons was the same time as our Rotary Club meeting. So he reluctantly left for his health. And then he also had the brain implant to slow down the tremors.
DVS surgery.
Yeah, it did help. I haven't seen them. I'll have to ask my husband. He goes down there more often than I do, so see how they're doing, because it's been a long time that he's had it. He was a veterinarian, so I don't know what environmental things he might have been exposed to. We lived in a farming community where they had the crop dusting, so that was always fun to try to avoid. So again, I'm not sure modern life is great for our brains. We're going to have to figure out how to navigate modern life. Well, I think there's some things we need to just stop doing, but that's a whole other topic. So the one thing I wanted to ask you before we get too far close to the end is, so did you stop working to take care of your mom?
No, I wasn't able to because I'm a professor, so I teach around the country, and I just, the nice thing is I was able to kind of be flexible when you're a professor, and so I did sacrifice a lot of my own health, but again, because I used to love to, work out, exercise myself. My favorite thing was Sundays. I would play basketball. I had a group of like 50 guys, and I'm getting older, so it took me a half hour to get ready because you have to put a million things on your ankles. I've broken every ankle. And I remember one morning, it's in the book, that I was all ready to go and at least get an hour break of life. And unfortunately, my mother's, dementia kicked in, and she would call me 24/7 saying the people there are harming her. Somebody's gonna, like, she's very scared. And I knew if I was there with her, she would felt safe. So I would drop everything and just rush over. And I'm glad I did it. But again, that goes against the number one rule: take care of yourself first. But I didn't, we were told you don't die of Parkinson's, you die with it. My mother was only 69. She had no other medical issues at all. So we were kind of still in shock that she passed due to it, because whether it was because of Parkinson's or the other medicines, I mean, when she passed away, I had to, tough time was cleaning out our home, which I'm sure it's hard for everyone, but she had like 5 huge contractor-sized black bags, garbage bags of medicines, and I feel that that could have caused, obviously, speeding up the problem rather than reducing it. So so anyway, that was the tougher part of the caregiving world. But like I said, I wouldn't trade it for the world, because if I could just have my mother feel a little safe, then that's all I want to do. And I have an incredible wife, because towards the last year, my mother was kind of getting so thin, like so thin that it wasn't even recognizable, and I felt horrible for her. And she still wanted to be a woman and be like a person and not let the disease take over everything. So my wife brought in like a pedicure, manicure, hair done, and all different beautiful things. And some days it was tough. She was too sick, but she loved it when she was able to have it. She also loved when her 3 grandkids came over, because they were really small, but we had one room dedicated where they can destroy it. It was like the kids' playroom, and she would sit there, and she was, a lot of times she was shaking things, but she always was happy when they were screaming and playing. And she loved to blow bubbles in the backyard with them on Sundays. And now where I live, we actually bought a bigger home because she was going to move in with us. And so it's tough to even live here, to be honest, because I walk by the room that should have been hers. I walk by the backyard that she should be out there. And I feel that Parkinson's took 15 years of her life alive and 15 years afterwards. So that's, it's heartbreaking, but I'm inspired by people like you and people I meet. And I still, like you said, learn something new every day, even from our talk today. I'm not like a lot of people who think because I have 3 master's degrees, a law degree, the PhD, and the police, that I still have a lot to learn. And every day to me is still a learning experience.
You make me sound like a dummy. I have like 1 degree.
That's more than enough. You're not supposed to have more than one. I had plans to go, into federal law enforcement, so it always a plan. But I'm glad I kind of fell in love with education, and my career before caregiving or my life was aiding African American mothers who lost their loved one due to a crime in West Palm Beach, Florida, murder. A lot of time, unfortunately, I'm sure even if you just everyone out there watching TV, unfortunately, you'll have a victim, but then the family members become secondary victims, and a lot of time they're forgotten by the criminal justice system. And I kind of correlate that to the Parkinson's community, because as we said earlier, they've been forgotten by our government, our political system, and even awareness. So now we're finally shedding some light on it, but it's very important to keep fighting.
Well, the reason I asked if you had the ability to stop working, which you didn't, you had flexibility, which is necessary. If you'd gone into federal law enforcement, you wouldn't have had that flexibility.
Right.
So I'm assuming you would either have had to not care for your mom the way you did, or you would have had to quit that job. Yeah. So what would you like, or how do you think employers should be considering, let's see, how do I want to word this? How should employers be supporting family caregivers so that, one, you can continue doing the things that need to be done to live, like pay bills and buy medicine for your mom and things for the kids, but also to keep the institutional knowledge, the a highly motivated employee, because if you're supporting them, they're going to be, unless they're very strange people, they're going to be super grateful and probably double down on what they can offer the corporation. So what kind of things do you think we should, like, we're advocating for awareness, but I think this kind of awareness also stretches into, like, if we don't fix and support family caregivers much better, we're going to spiral into a really bad economic place that I don't want to live in. Thank you. We got people that have to leave work early or leave work entirely, which reduces the amount of money they have to live or reduces the amount of money they have for retirement, which then puts the burden on the next generation. And then maybe they're leaving work early. So you can see this is a very bad snowball effect that we really should avoid. So my question back to you is, what do you think employers could and should do to help support their employee family caregivers?
I mean, that's a good question. I teach business law and HR management, so it's a
Perfect question for you.
I mean, we have laws out there like Medical Leave Act of FMLA. We have ADA laws. We have equal protection. So many laws of EEOC, and how many of them are really upheld? That's another accountability is important. But problem is, I don't know if you can really regulate private versus public type companies. Probably public you can more. Private, they do what they want to do. It's their private company. I think it's important even just to have a little training, maybe yearly. I know in a lot of jobs I work, we're required to take, sexual harassment training, ADA training. Every week there's a new training, and I don't even really teach anymore. It's always training. So they can definitely implement something which would show a lot of support. I actually am targeting the emergency management world. I'm going to work on a book soon about policing in Parkinson, because I actually taught at the academy. And it's ironic, and I don't like talking a lot about it because I don't want to ruin. They'll go and put it in, and then they don't have a book. But so right now, when you read the academy, there's only like 10 minutes at all for all these diseases. But it literally says, and I have it in the next room, all elderly, and it says Alzheimer's and dementia, but there's nothing. The word Parkinson doesn't exist. So I really want to write a book on that. And Michael J. Fox Foundation said hopefully they'll still be able to at that time. They would help me try to sponsor a bill through Congress throughout the United States. So to have every police department in the United States implement the word Parkinson into their training. And this isn't just police. It needs to go for fire, for nursing, for everything, so that we have something out there. Because this in law enforcement, as many of your viewers know, unfortunately, bad things can happen if officer isn't trained. Well, I've heard horror stories where someone has external tremors and they're shaking uncontrollably, and let's say they're driving at midnight or it's 11 at late at night, it's dark, they get pulled over. I don't want that officer to think they're drunk or drive DUI, or maybe they are drugged, and that's not it. They have Parkinson's, and in that 1 second moment of interaction could end very badly. So that's really goes to the core of what you're saying, because police department, even though we don't think of it, is also in a way a business and has this standard operating procedures, chain of command. So, we need more of these organizations to put literally just the word Parkinson's. That could be a great way to start, and also the caregiver. So right now it doesn't exist at all. So anything might be better than nothing.
We introduced, and I say we, as Alzheimer's Association, really pressed for a bill in California last year that would have given, I know it was police, I don't remember if it included firefighters, and it was endorsed by most of the police associations in the state, like 13 of them. I don't know how many we have. We got a lot of people in the state. So, and it wasn't an expensive bill. It was the first year, but it supported more training. And I'm, going out on a limb here, don't really think that police officers want to let's spend more time in a classroom learning about dementia. Probably not priority on their list. So the fact that the police associations were behind this bill was heartwarming. Unfortunately, California's economy is either surplus or deficit. The way we fund our state has got to change. So because we're now having a deficit, which has been exacerbated by all the strikes in Hollywood and everything else that's been going on lately, the bill didn't pass mostly because they were like, "Ooh, we don't want to spend." I think it was like $13 million. It was not a whole lot of money. I mean, $13 million would certainly change my life, but that was kind of one of the things we were pointing out. And one of the state representatives that I spoke to actually had an elderly next door neighbor try to get into their house through the sliding glass door in the back. Now you can only imagine. Here's a law, not a, what is it? A legislator, California state legislator, and here's this person trying to get in their house, and our political environment right now is not warm and fuzzy, to say the least. I mean, bad things could have happened had this legislator, had she not been aware of what was going on with the neighbor. And so definitely awareness is crucial, because like you said, you've got somebody with tremors, pull them over, in the wee hours of the night, and they may not be able to comply as they are requested to do. But I'm sure the first thought is like, here's this guy, he's all shaky and twitchy. And I'm sure since you deal with, not always the best people, that your first instinct is not going to be Parkinson's. It's going to be some sort of drug.
Safety, yeah, or also safety for the officer and the.
And I can see backlash might be a strong term, but a resistance, because if you assume it's Parkinson's or maybe it's Alzheimer's and that's why they're not being compliant, now you've got your safety at risk also. So it's like, oh my goodness. So I'm with you there on the advocacy. We need to, we need people to understand, and I'm sure my audience fully understands this already. So spread the word, guys, is that these diseases touch everybody, whether you're aware of it or not. Maybe your next door neighbor is taking care of a family member long distance, and they're stressed out, and maybe they're drinking a lot more than they should, or they have to cut back on their work hours. So now they're not able to do things to keep their home up, which affects your property value. I mean, there's a lot of things that are less visible. And this is why I'm not thinking corporations need to have a regulation. I would like to see HR departments have the training to recognize somebody that might be dealing with these kind of stresses that you and I have gone through, although I can't imagine how we would do that. And just find ways to support the employee, because it's going to help support the business's bottom line. We don't need the government involved in that. Let's just go cold, hard cash. I'm an entrepreneur. Cash talks. It solves a lot of problems. We already have a worker shortage, and, training and hiring are expensive. So I really think that the more awareness we have overall and in corporations, the better everybody's going to be. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you today, just to help further that cause on both sides of the disease aisle there. Is there anything else? So you've mentioned the website, which will be hot linked in the show notes. And the book, I'll link that as well. I'm assuming it's on Amazon, or you can just get it through your website too.
Yeah.
And then
actually, we actually just the ebooks out. The ebook. I know I'm a first time in this area. Publishing a book was not easy. It was easier to write the book than to get it online. But we actually have an audio book coming soon, which will be somebody else's voice, like an exciting person, not my voice. But I thought it would be nice to just offer it. But we're not looking for it's really, I want this out there really for advocacy, and so people know our journey. But it really is a good book too, to help people not just cope, but understand what might be possibly what happened in our scenario. Doesn't mean it'll happen to them, but a lot of positive. So I always say there's a lot of light in the tunnel, even though it came from some tough times. So there's a lot of good in it. My wife's actually going to interview me about the book on a podcast coming soon, so that'll be fun. But I do have one last statement I usually say, and it's this goes to you and your audience too. We love you, we support you, we care a lot about you, and you're never alone. I, along with Jennifer, will advocate for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And I'm just getting started. And I only say that obviously because I've been doing it for a little time, but every day, like I said, I wake up and I see another one of those journeys that inspire me on my website, or maybe there's someone, the only journey that breaks my heart is the one I'm not aware of. And there are still so many people out there. I just got, while we were talking, a text of somebody, a very famous race car driver, lost somebody from Parkinson's. She's going to come on. We have a podcast now too. I never wanted a podcast. I didn't want a website. I wish I had my mother, but this again helps me cope. It helps me grieve, and I think it inspires some hope that you're never alone. So I just want to thank you and your audience today. And this is not just about a kind of quick talk and then bye-bye. Never see you again. I consider you like family, and your audience. We're not a foundation. We don't want money. It's just me and one son, one person who lost his best friend and mother, and it really breaks my heart every day. Knowing people like you and your audience are out there really just change. It's a game changer and inspires me again to just get up and keep fighting. So thank you and your audience again for the time. It means the world.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for joining us. And I know for those listening, you're still in the thick of things, most likely. It does change, as George and I can attest. And like he said, our voices amplified can make a change. So, embrace your caregiver friend that might be dealing with a family member with Parkinson's, and the Parkinson's people can embrace us Alzheimer's people, and we'll get this fixed. We will. Are you looking for additional advice, suggestions on a catch-up episode to listen to, or simply an easy way to get in touch with me? Then you definitely need to sign up for the weekly email newsletter. It is super short, chock full of excellent information, and I do not spam you at all. So, the link for the newsletter is in the show notes. Just click on it, sign up, and you will not regret hearing from me every Wednesday morning. And now, here's a taste of what you can expect next Tuesday.
It might not be the attending physician. The attending physician is the person who directs all the care. It might be the resident physician or the fellow. So it's attending at the top of the hierarchy, then the fellow, then the resident, and then the intern. And then below the intern is the medical student. And then, of course, there's a nurse. It might be the nurse. It might be the resident or fellow. It's usually not the attending. But I would say, figure out who's going to be your champion. And by champion, who's going to take the time to speak with you, to get to know your care partner, get to know their story, and get to know who they are through you. And I think that can be really, really helpful in helping to make sure that that story is known and it's really taken into account when treatment plans are developed.